Okie dokie. How's it going, everybody? How's it doing today? We're doing great. Thanks. We're so happy to have you back here again for another astonishing, amazing installment of the Arcane Archive presents Cautionary Chronicles.
You sound really excited, Dad.
Oh, I'm so excited, Sam. Can't you tell by the utter just uncontrollable, uncontainable excitement
Emotion and passion.
joy.
I got it all.
And just, gosh, praise the lords of hell for this horrible punishment that we must endure. But you know what? We love you guys. We're here for you. We're also here for ourselves because, we enjoy talking about this stuff with you guys, with each other, and that's what we do. So you know what? Without further ado, let's just please put us out of our misery sooner rather than later. Let's just jump right into this. Sammy, I do believe that you're going to be taking the first story for today. Go ahead. Let it happen. Just both barrels.
I have to say, that's the most monotone and melancholy I've ever heard you, I think, ever. So that's pretty good.
The more we do this, the more my soul seems to slightly like fracture and break off, almost like a Horcrux.
I don't know. Like,
I'm just dying inside.
Today's group isn't the worst we've dealt with, but let's
You're right. It's good.
I'm starting with a bit of a longer one. The title is DM Restarted Timeline of Our Adventure. Good evening. Mainly posting as a way to I guess, get my feelings out on my most recent session I had, and also to get some sort of advice following to check
Followed by to check in
that now I'm not looking at the situation weirdly.
English it was a weirdly kind of structured sentence.
Yeah.
The
grammar here is going to be bad, and if I sound stupid, know that it's the grammar and not me. But it could also be me. To provide some context, if any, to this situation, we were playing a game of Saltmarsh that leads into some homebrew stuff later on. We had a few additional rules and changes to base things that make the game more interesting. Nothing bad that adds or relates to the setup. So they had their own homebrew stuff, but none of it has anything to do with what's happening here.
We love that. Homebrew is always great. Always adds some homebrew flavor.
If it's agreed on, and it seems like this was. So we were going through the adventure, and for the first 5 or so levels, the game is nothing like we expect it to be. We expected this adventure to be whimsical pirate adventure, going across the sea adventure, treasure, etc., with the occasional scary or disturbing stuff. We knew that mind flayers would be a way
later thing,
which again, weird grammar, like levels 9 through 12. So they were expecting mind flayers. But I'm getting off track. What? So recently the story was just getting bleaker and bleaker. Not mind flayer stuff specifically. They were popping up way earlier than it should.
That was just a typo.
It had just gotten so dark, bleak that many of the players voiced to each other that they were getting tired of playing, and that their character has ended up so different from how everything started. Now, to start reeling in on the main point, last session we just completed a crazy battle. We were level 4 against a mind flayer and a white dragon. An adult white dragon. By being saved by an NPC, etc., etc. The NPC was a devil that a PC had to kill to get out of / finish a contract of some sort.
Yeah, he was tricked. He was tricked into making more complicated. Okay.
Basically, there was a contract. They were supposed to kill this devil that just saved them.
Yeah.
They defeat the devil, and they describe this devil as basically Asmodeus but different.
So as it was distracted, a new player who was new to the group
but had some ties to an old PC that was a part of our group a while ago. Her character was the daughter of an old PC, a divination wizard who got really good at time magic. So as this was happening, the Raven Queen, because this is great, I love this. She had made a deal with her to go into the devil's treasure hoard and recover a spark of her father's soul, so that she was told to save by the Raven Queen. So then the second deal is going on now. The Raven Queen got her to the location and gave her a broken hourglass staff. She managed to get the shard, repair the staff, and now she was suddenly in like an infinite hallway where a bunch of scenes were playing out.
Jesus, this is just becoming like This
So
is like watching Inception, but
yeah,
shittier. Like it's like what?
TLDR, God shit happened, and now one of their characters is in an infinite hallway of time.
She got banished. She's in the labyrinth. Somebody cast maze on her.
I like this next bit actually. After some deliberating out of character, because she had no idea what to do and asked for some help,
I don't
the
know.
DM, I guess, nudged her to certain scenes that she could interact with. Uh, she could interact with the mother of an NPC that I guess somehow affects all of our lives. The NPC is a piece of Poseidon, or I guess all of his godly power, and she had major problems with the gods and was posing to go to Poseidon's temple and basically threaten the devil to get a PC out of the pact and threaten to destroy the world or cause some sort of shattering.
What the hell is going on?
I have no idea.
I don't know what's
Either
happening.
way, she ends up saving the mother before she promised the NPC to Poseidon, and then the time shenanigans happens. So it
Oh
sounds like
God.
there was some sort of event that happened where someone was like promised to someone. There's a reason the contract happened, all this stuff, and they gave this character a way, like a basically an out to change it from ever happening, which is a cool concept, albeit I don't
That
know
is
if it
incredibly unnecessarily
so
convoluted.
here's the thing. I don't know if it's this convoluted in real time or this person just isn't good at writing things down. It could be a combination,
I
or
think
it
it
could
might
be,
be
yeah.
both, but I think even like he's getting. I don't even think he's like explaining all of the process.
No,
He's hitting the
no.
bullet points,
He's hitting
and
bullet points and it's not
if
good.
it's still this confusing, even with just the bullet points hitting.
But this isn't kind of really the important bit at all. But the character who saved the NPC's mother is now in a new timeline, and only she remembers it, while the rest of our characters in this timeline have no idea. So what this DM did is you get to keep your character.
Bro,
Everyone else's characters change,
Bro, he
which is
literally flash pointed this shit,
yeah,
dude.
he flashpointed
It's
it.
flashpoint paradox. This shit.
Um,
What the
so
hell?
here's the this is the problem bit when I was reading through this. This is the part that was the real problem. Now on to the big thing. The event changes almost everyone's backstory, with only two of them
Oh,
being untouched as far as we are aware. A few examples are, oh, you are now an experienced captain and your brother was murdered. Your childhood was a lot
uh,
darker. And instead of A and B happening, C and D happened. One of the players' backstory was completely erased and changed, and now he was just a guy with amnesia working at a store.
what?
We were all taken aback when the DM shared that this time change shift was permanent, and that the old timeline and everything with it, along with some of our original backstory, was gone and changed, with only that new person's character aware of the change. I personally still don't know how to feel about it. I know one player, the one whose backstory was completely wiped out, was a bit out of it, especially with how much has changed for his character. Now onto the advice part of this long adverb, which that adverb is a poor use of wordage there. What should, if anything, can be done here? With some of us talking to the DM, with DM present, this world and backstories are arguably a lot lighter and better off than the old timeline. But I, and especially the guys whose backstory and I guess original timeline character was scrapped, feel bad about this sudden and abrupt change. And to clarify, now we had no idea that this was going to happen, and we had to play out our new selves mid-session, with some of us just being shell-shocked.
Yeah.
On one hand, this new universe for a lot of the players is arguably a better off, and a lot lighter, or so far appears lighter than the original timeline. So a few of the players are okay with this change. But then there's the fact that our backstories were changed and, for less than a better word, scrapped. I feel so bad for the one player whose backstory, from what he asked of the DM, is completely gone. His backstory wasn't bad, especially in the group where half of them are innately grim, mine included. But on the other hand, from what the DM has shared with what we were heading towards, we were already heading towards a bad ending in the campaign, or just a worse time. And he decided to, I guess, interstellar us.
It was Flash. There's more Flashpoint than
Yeah,
Interstellar, but
100
still.
percent. Flashpoint was a great use. I
To
love that.
reset the DC. I mean, it's literally DC's retcon card every
Yeah.
time. Anytime they've written
It's just the
themselves a
new.
little
It's
bit too
the
far, they're
Well, it's
like,
like the new
"Oh,
52. They just go new 52
well,
or
that was
4 or
Flashpoint.
yeah.
That literally came up because of Flashpoint." But this is like,
To
anyway, continue.
yeah, to round out, I feel like we should talk to the DM about this more, or maybe one-on-one, but it's weird because over half of the players are okay with this change, and I don't think they would want to go back to the old timeline with how it was going. But then there's an argument for like two players whose situation wasn't bad in the old timeline. The two where one of the players' backstory wasn't changed, and the guy whose backstory was just gone. And then there's me, whose backstory was kind of changed, but I still feel weird about this whole endeavor. Then there was the whole different problem with most of us, DM included, have been in bad groups before, and we as players do not want to do anything to rock the boat because discourse that would dub us a problem player. The mindset was a lot worse back then. We've been in group for 4 years and played through 4 campaigns. Now with the new player just joining us this campaign. So, look,
In post, that was
in post. That's it. Like,
I mean,
there is. I do want to say something. And this first, one of the top
oh,
comments
like
do actually kind of. I kind of agree with it. Kind of don't. I don't know why you all worry so much about the backstory. Play the front story more. Your characters aren't interesting for what happened before they got to the table. This sounds like a fun story to be told if everybody would put some trust in the DM and just roll with it.
I
Now,
mean,
again, we don't know how this was all put in front of the characters. If this was just explained badly, and this was some crazy shit that happened, and like everybody just
apparently in one session,
yeah,
like
like that's okay. I think doing like stuff like this is okay. I I am okay with changing like a thing here and a thing there in backstory with like time magic stuff. When you
sure.
completely erase someone's story, my thing would be I would go to that player ahead of time and be like, "Hey, I don't want you to metagame, but this is something I'm thinking about. Can we come up with another story for you together?" Because
I mean,
you
like,
take
yeah, like
away any input a person has, because everybody else, it seems like things were changed here and there. And in that way, you're still using what they wanted to do. You're still including what they wanted to include in the story, but you're changing little bits because you want to take the direction of the campaign somewhere else, which to me, it seems like things were going poorly, and the DM wanted a reset button, but wanted to keep it in story so they could still play, which I think is fine. I like the idea.
I
The
don't think
idea
there's
is
anything
cool.
inherently wrong with that, but I mean,
No,
I would just submit that much like kind of, DC's Flashpoint, retcon button. The problem is that it often can feel a little again cheap or forced, and like especially in this particular situation. Like, don't get me wrong, I also like that though. I do think it is a really cool idea and concept to have a literal retcon, but for in-universe reasons. On like this is why things now are different or can be different and can be what are they rebooted, so to speak. But the issue being though, the issue is yeah, him being the one who just arbitrarily and solely like just all by his lonesome himself deciding how everyone's backstory now goes. Like that is the issue here. He should not have been the one to just solely decide how everyone's characters' backstories are now going to change or be different.
yeah,
If he was going to do this, he should have done it probably maybe towards the end of the session to then be like, okay, things are different now. Now we're going to talk with everybody. We're going to work with everybody. And you guys have an opportunity to change up your backstory a bit, to make certain things different, to make certain changes. And then we can implement that together. That is, I think, the big problem is he just chose to decide everything for everyone instead of including the players in there. I agree though. Like I do agree like with you and the top comment as well of like, hey, you don't have to pay as big an attention to the backstory. It's true. Don't get me wrong. Here's the thing. I love backstory. I do write kind of deliberate backstories for all of my characters because I like that thing, and it is always very fun and cool because it is technically what makes it establish certain core aspects of your character. It does. But at the same time, you absolutely should be playing the present. Live in the present, not in the past.
yeah.
But like I said, I think the
There's
biggest issue was just he didn't talk with them. Like
yeah.
he should have worked with them rather than just forcing this on them.
To give this DM credit, like I don't know if the reason the campaign was feeling a certain way was due to his storytelling or the way the characters were telling
written
the
and then
story.
played, yeah.
Because one, you talk about wanting this fantastical adventure, but the OP commented multiple times about how about half of the backstories were grim and not
Innately,
good.
yeah, innately
And so
grim or
like
just kind of dark.
if they un without realizing it, brought that kind of atmosphere to the table, and it was starting to get that way. And the DM just couldn't figure out another way to pull it out, like pull them out of that. I kind of get where they were going with this, because it's a way of retconning without just saying we're going to retcon. It was a way for them to keep their characters and still have some of their story elements and still give them a chance to play through this story. Um, but the one thing that really bothers me is the full just erasure of a person's backstory. Um, there's a better way to handle it, but I got where they were going.
Sure, no, I understand
Yeah.
too. Where it's just like certain thing. It's the whole concept of like so-called butterfly effect or so-called whatever. Where it's like if you change one thing, some people might be roughly the
Yeah.
same. Others could be drastically entirely different. And so I did understand, like, yeah, absolutely what he was going for here. Like I said, this is classic Flashpoint shenanigans happening, which is fun. Flashpoint Paradox is one of the best kind of written stories in a lot of ways, especially for DC. But it's like, again, the problem is with this is that, and how I feel about this too, and I will reiterate this multiple times. GMs do not have control over characters, over players' characters. You just don't. Like, you can work with your player, and the players themselves can't just arbitrarily or just do whatever the hell they want with their characters in your world either. But it works both ways. You can't just sit there and go like, hey, this is now what your character is. This is what your character feels. This is what your character is doing. This is what, like, that's not how that works. And so for the GM to essentially do that, to completely destroy, this character's backstory, and like, again, to Sam's point, this OP is like, yeah, we expect this to be a very whimsical pirate adventure, and things are just getting dark and bleak. And it was like, yeah, perfect. So you want a bit of a reset, and so completely changing something up where he's now like an amnesiac character working in a bookstore, like, what is that? Like, where are
Yeah.
you going with that? And like, is that I would also I also do realize we are missing a great deal of context for the characters, right? What the characters are like, what their motivations are, their personalities, what they like to do. So it's like, I don't know, maybe he thought that the character would like that or the player would like that, but I don't know. Like, we don't have enough real context to
No.
be able to accurately say if this move was made maybe it with well intentions and with the idea or the consideration of the players in mind, or if this was just kind of a selfish, like, you know what, we're all feeling kind of whatever, but this is how I'm going to change it. I want to make it like this instead of, again,
Yeah.
considering the players and bringing them in on this thing, because I definitely think that this is a thing that you need to have everybody aware of, at least, to then work. Like I said, maybe the best way to do it is the GM is like, okay, at the end of the session, he does this thing. The rogue or whoever like resets the timeline, comes the druid, whoever it was, and like the timeline has been reset. So now we're gonna end session here. Next week or whatever we're gonna play next, please be sure to send, like, we're gonna have a conversation, like me individually with everybody or whatever, to then figure out what your new kind of backstory, because your
Well, this, I
backstories
mean, you
could
could
be the
just use,
same, they could be different,
yeah, like
like,
I appreciate the OP trying to kind of like stick up for, like, feeling bad for the player that lost out all of his story.
I was gonna say, like, it's like if he's upset about that, he kind of has a reason to be, where you're like, if he liked his backstory and you're just gonna
Yeah.
take it from him, like, that's not good. So, but we don't quite have enough,
No.
yeah, real context to be able to give a verdict one way or the other. I will just say, I think the only real critique I could give myself is, yeah, in this situation, the concept was very interesting and cool and fun. Execution, I think, left a lot to be desired. And in that, when you're doing this, GMs, please do be sure to include your players in this. Like, again, right at the end, you cut it off right as the time reset happens, and then you work with them to then establish the new parameters of their characters, places where they might be, like, because that's the point of a reboot, right? Like,
Well, I
it's
mean, you could always treat this like a time skip. Do like a shorter session and have everybody kind of write or figure out what they would have been doing instead of what they were doing before, and
Yeah,
kind of give
where
them
are they
a,
now? You know.
you know, see what's possible, see what's not
Ooh,
possible,
ooh.
and talk as a group.
It's a session 0.5.
Yeah, that just you're
It's another
basically,
session 0. It's a reset
yeah,
session 0. There you go.
which I think is fine. It just,
Yeah,
you have to do it, and you have to make sure that the people who are there are like, you know,
down for it. Like,
yeah.
but anyway, let's move on to our next story for the day. This one's also gonna be a bit long. It's gonna start out how removing a problem player destroyed my group. TLDR, for those of you who don't want to stick around for this one, I kicked a problem player out of my group after giving multiple warnings and receiving complaints from every other player. I ended up losing 3 other players in the ensuing nuclear meltdown. This is a story that happened several months ago, but hasn't left my mind since. I ran a lengthy, multi-year Curse of Strahd campaign for a group of friends and acquaintances. This group imploded at the end of the campaign when I removed the problem player and all hell broke loose. Cast of characters is as follows. Ace, real-life relative of mine. Deuce, friend of Ace, who has been on the periphery of my social circle for decades and the problem player of this story. Trey, mutual friend of Ace and Deuce, I was also acquainted with. Catter, friend of Deuce, hadn't met before the campaign. Sink, friend of mine who joined the campaign later. Sace, another friend of mine who joined even later than Sink. Yes, I like Final Fantasy typo. I might be butchering some of those names there, just as a heads up.
Well, I thought it was in Spanish, but it's incorrectly spelled Spanish.
Yeah, no, I
But
was
I
gonna
don't think it
say.
is.
I
I don't
don't
know.
think. Yeah, I think it's a Final Fantasy kind of thing. Anywho, the story begins when Ace approached me about running a D&D campaign. When we were much, much younger, I had been the default DM for our group of friends during the 3.5e days because I had all the books. I had never run a long form campaign before, just random pickup games that usually only lasted a session or two. I had tried to run a COS previously for a group of coworkers, but that was right before the pandemic happened, so that group fell apart after only 2 or 3 sessions. Ace, Deuce, and Trey had been reminiscing about D&D and talking about getting a game going. Ace mentioned that I already had some books and some DMing experience, so he asked me to do it. I agreed to run an online game, and I was introduced to Cutter, and he joined the game. About a dozen or so sessions go by without too much of note, so instead I'll provide some insight into Deuce. Deuce is the type of player you've all heard about before. Usually plays chaotic neutral and excuses any bad behavior with "it's what my character would do." Ace and Deuce also argue and get sidetracked a lot. During this time, I don't pay it much mind because we all knew ahead of time who Deuce is, and we've become numb to these antics. I cut them off if they become too distracting and mostly muddle my way through the campaign. I have fun here and there, but I'm not really interested. I'm not really very invested in the campaign, and I'm just going off the book at this point. Then that changed when Sync joined. Sync is a gaming friend of mine, and who I had been telling stories of the campaign to. She had never played a TTRPG before, but was always interested. Previously, her schedule didn't align with our game time, but when that changed, I asked the group if they minded me inviting her. They hadn't met her before, but they agreed to welcome her. Sync wanted to play a non-PHB race for the campaign that wasn't typically found in Barovia. I decided to try and think of a lore-friendly reason for why her character would be there and ended up coming up with a homebrew background for her and changed some of the history of a major NPC to accommodate it. I mean, I don't really think you need that much of a thinker. I mean, literally Barovia is in the Dark Realms and they get all manner of weird people from all over the multiverse. So either way, once I had exercised some agency over the setting, I became a lot more invested and began incorporating more homebrew alongside things I found online. Things go great for a few more sessions until the party wipes in the werewolf den. Long story short, they had angered the pack leader enough that I felt it was appropriate for him to attack down PCs during combat. They almost won, but ended up being overpowered. Ace, Deuce, Trey, and Cutter, henceforth collectively known as the Boys, all lost their characters. Sink had decided her character didn't know the others well enough to die for them and fled once her character and Cutter were the only ones left alive. Fair enough, I guess. I thought it was a reasonable response. Given the nature of the campaign we were playing, and since I had become invested in it, I had prepared multiple contingency plans in case of a TPK. I told the boys to vote on how they wanted to proceed. They could either keep the characters they were currently playing but face some sort of penalty, or they could all roll new characters, and we would have a time skip and continue from there. Sync would keep her character either way. The boys voted to roll up new characters. Unbeknownst to them, their old characters are revived and will return as antagonists. Oh, I see what they're going for, but that could raise some issues. Continuing. Fast forward another half a dozen sessions, and I asked the group if I could invite another friend, and they agreed. Cease joins the party. Another few sessions occur, and we start running into problems. Supposedly, at some point, the boys all start hanging out after sessions and talking shit about Sync. I say supposedly because I only heard about this far after the fact and was not invited to any of these discussions. These are mostly fueled by Deuce. Deuce feels that I had been giving Sync preferential treatment. From what I was told, the other boys initially found her a bit annoying, but warmed up to her eventually, while Deuce continued to hate her. At the time this is happening, no one has mentioned anything to me, and I am unaware that there's any sort of issue. The only times I can think of giving her special treatment is when I sided with her in the arguments Deuce picked with her. Deuce has always liked to be the center of attention and would try to butt in on other people's scenes. The other boys usually abided this behavior, but Sync communicated her discomfort with it, so I would usually ask him not to purposely disrupt or sabotage her scenes, and he would get upset with that. He would also take any in-character slight personally. Deuce and Sync frequently disagreed in character, but while Sync recognized it was roleplay, Deuce would seethe behind the scenes. Sync was also the most invested in the storyline and would take detailed notes and craft theories. She would plan scenarios for her character with me ahead of time so I could orchestrate her arc the way she wanted. Though she also left enough room for me to fit in surprises. I really enjoyed having someone I actually collaborated with, and I encouraged the other players to do so as well. Cease was the only other one that did this initially. At this point, the old PCs had been revealed to be alive, so I used them to shine a spotlight on the boys. I even began writing short stories to fill in the gaps of the time skip and show what led to their characters becoming antagonists. I shared each story with the player whose character starred in it and asked for feedback before publishing to the rest of the group because I still wanted them to have input even though they didn't play the character anymore. Okay, see? I love that. I think that is a great way to try to handle that. Everyone just said what I wrote was fine, so I went with it. Well, see, they probably still have feelings about it, though. At this point, I still hadn't been clued into the depth of Deuce's problem with Sync, but was trying to be conscientious of not playing favorites. I've read my fair share of horror stories and know all about the NPCs, main characters, and the like. To combat both potential favoritism and add some spice to combat after the martial players expressed being bored of lengthy combat encounters, I decided to implement a secondary character progression system for everyone that was based on advancing their personal narrative rather than the main story. I asked them all, I do love that idea too. I asked them all to come up with goals they wanted to accomplish in Barovia and tied in their backstories to try and make it more engaging for everyone. That sounds amazing. This seemed to go over well, and people were enjoying the new abilities they were picking up and liked the storylines. As an example of how I was trying to balance everyone, the party had decided to go after Deuce's previous character. 6.5 sessions are dedicated to this arc, but Ace, Cutter, and Sync all progressed their personal storylines as well during this time. Immediately after, Cease gets some time to shine along with Trey's previous character. It's after this arc that things brewing in the background come to the surface. The boys and I had a group text chat that Sync and Cease opted out of, understandably not wanting to give their phone numbers out. It's in this chat that Deuce writes a very long text calling Sync and I out. Sync for not being a team player and me for playing favorites. He claims to be speaking for the rest of the boys as well, although none of them back him up vocally. Here is where I effed up. At this point, I'm tired of Deuce. He and Ace derail the game, constantly getting into arguments about things not even related to the game. He gets mad at me for telling him he can't do things like burn down an entire city when no one else wants to, and claims I'm playing favorites for siding with Sync, who is his most vocal opponent in this particular situation. He constantly interrupts scenes he's not a part of to make them about him, and I am tired of it. So I let him know as much in the group chat with admittedly less tact than I should have. We argue a bit, and he plays the victim and talks about how he was afraid to speak up because he knows how close Sync and I are. and that he's voicing problems that everyone has, not just him. The argument with him fizzles out, and I begin reaching out to the other boys to try and figure out what is happening. This is when I'm finally told that Deuce has been going on anti-sync tirades for months and trying to rally the other boys against her. This is also when I'm told the other boys found her annoying in the beginning. All three of them said they warmed up to her eventually and didn't have a problem with her anymore. I told them that if they have any problems with other players in the future, that they should speak with me privately first so we could make a plan to address them. I told them that part of the job of a DM is keeping the peace at the table, and I want to make sure everyone is comfortable and having fun. I'm told by everyone that they don't have any problems anymore, and it's all Deuce. Apparently, they then tell Deuce that I reached out to them, and he treats this as a personal betrayal and thinks I'm trying to turn his friends against him. Whatever. Sync isn't privy to any of this, so I give her a rundown. Her immediate response is to leave the campaign to avoid further issues. I told her that I didn't want her to leave the campaign and assured her I would keep the peace. She's reluctant to continue playing because Deuce is part of the original group of players and feels he has more right to play than she does, but I eventually convince her to stay. We continue playing a few more sessions, and Sync's character becomes mind-controlled and turns hostile to the party. The party is aware that this is mind control and that they need to break the control. I give Sync a powered-up stat block and have her initiate PvP. I had mentioned this would be happening to Sync ahead of time, and looking back, I probably should have said something to the others as well, but I didn't. I was going to say, I'm like, this, you are already aware of the tumultuous kind of thing going on here, and now you're just giving this dude literally the exact ammunition he wants to take out his frustrations. I don't think this is a good idea at all. Sync asks me if she should hold back at all, and I tell her no. I have multiple contingencies in place in case shit really hits the fan, but I wanted it to be a very challenging encounter for the rest of the party. Deuce and Cease both go down and fail their death saving throws. Sync is subdued and restored to sanity. Deuce and Cease are brought back, and the atmosphere and character is fairly tense. Oh shit. Some harsh words are exchanged in-game, and Sync's character is falling over himself to apologize. Most everyone said it was a fun session. Even Cease, who went down in the first round and ended up just watching, said she had fun. Oh, you hate to see that. Deuce was not happy, however. Although he didn't say anything at the time, he felt unfairly targeted and thought Sync was being treated as the main character. This is in spite of the fact that when he came up with a storyline for personal progression, he told me he wanted to experience death and rebirth, so I was able to give him a free resurrection and advance his narrative during this session. Okay. The campaign advances pretty much the same way up until the end. Deuce continues his problem behavior, although I'm able to mitigate it somewhat. By this time, I had spoken to him multiple times about being disruptive, but I still had to threaten to mute him fairly frequently. Along the way, I received private messages from almost every other player complaining about Deuce. The only player who didn't send me a message about him opted to instead voice their complaints to me in person. As the campaign is approaching the final arc and preliminary discussions about what's coming next begin, Ace and Sync both tell me that they don't want to play in whatever campaign I run next if Deuce will be there. I tell them that I won't be inviting him back and ask if they could put up with him until the end of the campaign. They said yes. And despite everything that had happened, I still don't dislike Deuce as a person. I didn't want to deprive him of missing the ending of the campaign, and I also still wanted to maintain an amicable relationship with him. I just didn't want to play TTRPGs with him anymore. That's fair. We finished the campaign right before the holidays, and I announced we would take a break for a couple months before jumping into the next game. Prior to this, I had discussed my ideas for a shorter campaign with a pulp action vibe before moving on to our next big multi-year campaign, which I had already picked out. Everyone told me they were on board with these ideas. The holiday break gave me time to think of what to say to Deuce. I drafted up texts to the rest of the boys, saying that I had made the decision to not invite Deuce to the next game. Responses ranged from relief to sorrowful understanding. No one asked me to reconsider my decision. I then sent what I felt was a diplomatic message to Deuce that basically said, I won't be inviting you to my next game. I received a lot of complaints about your behavior during the campaign, and I think it would be best if you don't join us for the next one. I still like you as a person, but I don't want to DM for you anymore. Deuce did not respond well to this message. In the group chat for the boys, he claims to have reached out to the rest of them privately to ask if they can play. Presumably, they said no because he placed the blame for his removal entirely on Sync. God, see this? This is, I hate that. I hate that. If you're gonna be honest. He then brought up a bunch of his old grudges against her from, at this point, years ago, and said he and everyone else wanted her out of the group, but he did the mature thing and approached us about it. He called Sync out for remaining silent in a group text she had never been a part of and claimed she somehow had power over me and was forcing me to kick him out. He accused me of nepotism because Sync had the gall to plan things with me and he felt left out despite my repeated attempts to engage the other players with the story. He then told me my run as a DM was coming to an end because no one liked the campaigns I suggested and Kater was going to take my place. I found this funny because not only had everyone told me to my face that they liked my campaign ideas, but Kater had also run an unsuccessful campaign that Ace and Trey bailed out of because they thought it was boring. Wow. For what it's worth, I played in that campaign as well, and I had my gripes but enjoyed it overall. Ace and Trey wanted to just stop showing up, but I thought it was effed up to not say anything and volunteered to break the bad news. Jesus, dude, what the heck is up with these guys? Are you been playing for this long and you don't even have the basis line of consideration and respect? Jeez, are you supposed to be friends? Deuce was aware of all of this at the time, but he goes on to accuse me of being duplicitous in his latest rant because I'm the only one who respected him enough to tell the truth. He goes on to call me a tyrant and a simp and says I can't play with them anymore. I excuse myself from the group chat and reach out to the others to apologize for the drama. Trey and Kater both say they need a break from TTRPGs after all that. Ace says he's not interested in my next campaign and won't be joining. Kater asks me to hit him up once my next campaign ends and I start the one after that. The next day, Ace tells me that Deuce cut Trey out of his life because Trey didn't back him up in the group chat. They make up a couple days later. This isn't the first time Deuce has cut Trey off for some minor slight, and I'm sure it won't be the last. Deuce sends me another long text a couple of days later, further insulting me and accusing me of gaslighting him. He says he has evidence backing up his claims that everyone hated Sync, but says I'm not worth it. What? This is especially funny to me because I also have evidence of people saying they don't want to play with him, but I didn't rub it in his face. I just gave him a thumbs up and stopped responding. Honestly, probably for the best. At this point, it becomes apparent that the boys just go along with whatever is convenient for them at the time. No shit, dude. And do whatever they can to stay out of the conflict. Understandable, but still kind of shitty. Absolutely shitty. And it's not understandable. If you're having a problem, stop lying to everybody about it. Like, what do you really feel? What are you really feeling and thinking? Don't just say shit that you think people want to hear. Like, God, do you have any balls at all? Jesus. At this point, I don't think I'll ever know because I doubt I'll play TTRPGs with any of them again. Sync was glad that it was over, and Cease had been keeping her head down, but agreed with the complaints against Deuce and the decision to remove him. Sync, Cease, and I are currently playing in the pulp action game I proposed. We picked up 3 more people, and so far everything is going well. In fact, it's going so well that I've received requests to extend the campaign longer than I originally planned, because everyone is having so much fun. If you'll permit me to flex a bit, of course. I haven't talked to Deuce, Trey, or Kater since, and I'm not too upset about that. You shouldn't be. I know Ace isn't playing in a campaign currently, so if Kater really did start a campaign, Ace isn't a part of it. Not the ending I'd intended for this group, but I can honestly say it's in a much better place now. There are probably ways I could have handled this situation better, but I did generally try to be diplomatic and respectful of the group dynamic since the boys were all friends outside of the game. Maybe I shouldn't have tried to bring in some of my own friends to the game since it ended up causing a divide, but I wasn't enjoying the game as much as I did before. End post. Whew! That was a long one, but honestly, that was really good. Like, this is a... Oh my God, go ahead, bud. Like,
I mean, I just like the when I started reading this, when we were kind of looking through stories, the first thing I got was super weird incel vibes from like the dudes. Just
like,
for the sad, because like we can say whatever we want. Sure, there might have been some real reasons to hate on this player. It's because it was a girl.
I mean, it's definitely
Man's
one of the
fucking
biggest.
down.
It's definitely one of the biggest things for sure. He is
And-
simping for sure.
And like, no, I'm not talking about that. I mean, like, the other players didn't like her because it was a girl, and she wanted to talk and be
No.
part of the story.
What I'm saying is, I hella bet you, homeboy Deuce was hella projecting onto the
Yeah,
GM.
probably.
He literally called him being like a simp and
Yeah.
favoritism. I bet homeboy was also probably simping for her and maybe did some stuff and she wasn't down for, or they clashed too much. And he was like,
My whole thing with this is like, I think this person actually handled it the best way they could have.
I think so too. They seemed very
You
cordial,
I'm gonna
respectful.
say this. I don't think these friends are worth having outside of the game either, because they literally couldn't even back up what they said to you.
They kept going back. They apparently, because again, I also agree. If Deuce is actually claiming that it's all Sync's fault and he asked everyone else and they're apparently still friends, and all of a sudden Ace and Trey are like, yeah, no, I don't want to play anymore. And it's like,
Well, I do get the not wanting to be a part of things anymore because it was just a lot. And like he also brought the OP brought up the point that they are friends in real life, and so I get it. Sometimes when things get stressful around a D&D table, you just don't want to do it anymore.
that's
But
understandable.
and
But
that's
it's like,
okay. But like, don't lie when they then ask, "Did you tell him to
well,
kick me out of the game?"
like
Say yes, and give your reasons.
again, I'm sitting here. I'm like, the GM literally asked you guys how you felt. Like, I hate this. It's a bunch of sniveling punk wussy crap where you're just like, bro, you telling him one thing, but then you're saying another thing to him because you don't what you don't want to be liked by, you don't want to be disliked by anybody. Like, bro, the point of the game is to have fun. If you're not having fun with this guy, and the GM is again, I hate it because the GM, they literally did everything in their power as best as they could to make it good. They asked, they're like, hey, what's up? Do you feel this way about this? And they all agree. They asked, hey, how do you feel about Sync? Do you not like her? Well, she was annoying a little bit at first, but we all warmed up to her. We're fine with her now. It's like, what do you expect to happen then? This is the
Yeah,
problem with
it was super weird.
communication. When a person, it's not just always like, oh, hey, the GM is messing up and not communicating. It's like, okay, the GM is doing everything right. They're asking you, they're communicating with you. They're like, hey, let me know what's going on. Hey, I'm trying to get you guys more involved in the game. I'm trying to like give your back. So you guys feel like maybe Sync is a bit too, favorite, like a bit too much favoritism, only because she's being actively involved. She is actively
Yeah,
engaging and
it sounds more like
communicating.
she was just a better player.
That's what it sounds like to me. And they were butthurt about it. And
it gets pathetic to me, and
agreed.
I'm a big fan of respect between your players and your GM. If your GM has rules and things they don't like and stuff like that, and your players stick to them, but your players also have expectations, and your GM just doesn't give a shit, like that. There is, to me, there is an expectation of respect between the two parties, and this was not it. This DM had the respect and tried to give it, and it was not reciprocated. And I wouldn't recommend them ever playing with these people again. The
I
people that stuck
mean,
with him, the two girls that stuck with him, keep them. They obviously, I do get one of them kind of keeping their head down because it's a lot,
it's a
and
lot. Like
they're
she
just gonna
didn't want
make
this.
you're
That's not
probably
what she
gonna
came
make.
here for.
Well, it's also like you're now making yourself a target. I get that. Um, but in my opinion, like the other dudes in the campaign didn't even have the balls to own up to the fact that they didn't like what the other player was doing, and
That's
they
what
didn't
I'm
want to play with him.
saying. You like where you at? Bro, you a
And
bunch
I
of punk asses, bro.
and
Like,
like look, I've had this problem before with people where I literally just told them like, dude, I just don't like hanging out with you. I'm sorry, like I just don't fucking care for you.
that's what I'm saying.
And
I'm like, it's just like, hey, you know what? This just isn't for me. Like, you and I just don't really jive anymore. I'm sorry. Like, I don't know what to tell you,
maybe
bro.
it's if it's just something that you're doing and maybe it's not who you are as a person, fine, we can talk about it. But like the reality is like
I hate that passive chameleon crap where you're just literally just trying to pander and cater to
yeah.
everybody to try your best to avoid any kind of conflict or confrontation. Look, yes, confrontation is intrinsically uncomfortable. It almost always will be. Anybody who's comfortable with confrontation probably has an anger problem and is always looking for it. It's not even real, in my opinion, real confrontation. Real confrontation is something that is like, hey, you're trying to make actual progress in some way in a more healthy direction for yourself, for our group, for whatever. And in this instance, it's clear that all of them, except for Deuce, who was just like high off his own freaking fart fumes, like none of them wanted to do anything. They just didn't want any kind of conflict or confrontation. And they were just said whatever they had to momentarily get out of it because they're a bunch of punk ass wusses, bro. And they got no damn balls, and that is just it's pathetic to see. It's bad taste. It's a bad sour taste.
I don't know if it's me just being a little bit mean, because all the people I play with, I like know in real life. But this is to me, this is what the internet playing has done to something like a tabletop RPG, is the whole weird ass internet behavior that I do not.
I mean, maybe, but apparently the boys all know each other.
No, yeah,
too.
Sure.
Like,
but something that's happening over the internet is influencing them to this point.
Yeah, you're not wrong.
Weird.
Well, because it's like
weird.
Again, it's because
it's
people
so weird.
People no longer are required to deal with their discomfort, right? When you're online, it's as easy. You can literally get rid of it with as easy as a block, right? You just block somebody. You don't want to talk to them, you block them. Oh, you don't want to interact with them? You disconnect from the call and you block the server, or you leave the server, or you ban them from the server, or whatever. It's just, you don't have to actually deal with any kind of real confrontation anymore.
To me,
it's not online.
This is pathetic internet culture at its finest, and I don't
even believe in this thing, but these are some actual grade A beta male shit right here, bro.
It's just behavior.
I don't even believe necessarily in the alpha, sigma, whatever the fuck. It doesn't technically even exist. It's a myth. But it's like, if I have ever seen any like example or evidence that it might exist, this is it right here, bro.
It's rat behavior, honestly.
It's straight rat. It's some snaky rat behavior, bro.
It's not, and because snakes are like, they can fend for themselves and actually do it. Rats, they can't.
Well, I mean, snakes are always slithering behind, like, because you never know. Like,
but this is just like, I don't want to deal with it, so I'm gonna go over here and hide. And it's fucking
pathetic. It's some rat bastard shit, is what it is, bro. All right, you know what? Enough of that. We can let them do whatever the hell they're doing. Let's move on to the next story. Sam, you want to go ahead and take it away?
Yeah, I have. Our next one is a stickler for stats, and this is one of Adam's that he found, which I also thought was interesting.
One. Yeah, this is something we got some thoughts about myself. So.
This is a shorter one, but it's much easier to read for me, so that's all good. I had been invited to join a game that was about to start by the DM, who was a friend of my significant other at the time. I hadn't been there for session 0, but they assured me it would be okay. Cool. I like that you knew about that and asked, and they said it was fine. With my significant other in the room with me to help fill in things, they walked me through the basic premise, lore, etc. over text. Everything so far is normal. Then we get to character creation, and they tell me I have a choice of rolling or taking point by, and rolls would be 4d6, drop the lowest, and reroll ones. That rolling method has a tendency for some good results. So I went for rolling. I grabbed my dice and roll 18, 17, 16, 16, 12, 11.
That's crazy. That is incredible. An amazing roll.
Probably the best stats I'd ever rolled to that point. We take a picture of the rolls and send them over. They text back, paraphrasing here, those are too high, roll again. Okay.
Oh, that just hurts.
I'm super bummed, but I get it. If someone I didn't know had told me they rolled those stats, I'd be suspicious too. I ask if they want me to send a video of the roll, but they assure me that's not the problem. It's just that they don't want there to be too big of a disparity in power between players. Again, sort of understandable, but in my opinion, that's why you would have the whole party choose or be able to choose from any of the rolled stats or use a common array.
Exactly!
The next rolls, 17, 17, 15, 13, 12, 12. Not as good as before, but still incredible. Still way too high, roll again. Okay, third rolls, 16, 15, 15, 13, 11, 10. Again, pretty good, but nowhere near as good as the previous two. Still need to roll again. At this point, this is ridiculous. Either they really don't trust me or I'm being pranked. I asked if they just want me to use point by. They respond, if the stats are higher than what you can get with point by, you'll have to re-roll. I kindly said, I'll pass on the game. It probably wasn't going to be for me. It's not that I couldn't have godlike stacks, but that interaction rubbed me the wrong way. They really wanted someone to roll poorly, and I felt like it was probably a sign of things to come. Edit. The rolls aren't the exact ones I got. Those have been long lost to time, but are approximately right.
My God! In post, Jesus.
So here's, me and Adam talked about this because this is a short read, so we basically read it before. There's something that I do in my games that gets rid of this problem entirely, and that is, as a group, we, including the DM, because it's fun for everyone, we all roll one set. Like, we all roll. So what we do is we go around the table, and in order, someone rolls 4d6, drop the lowest, and we write down what they roll. And we're gonna do that. We do that 2 times through for 2 stat arrays. We do 4d6, drop the lowest, and in my games, if I run it, I also do roll 7 stats, drop the lowest.
Hmm.
And at the end, we have 2 stat lines. And what I allow the players to do is, as a group, they choose one of the 2 stat lines, and then everyone uses the same set of numbers. You can move them around or do whatever you want to them. But for the sake of it, that way no one feels like they got the shit into the stick, and no one feels like they rolled okay, but someone rolled just stupid, or they might be lying or whatever. We also usually, like, if it's under a certain number, we take that stat line away. Like if you were like all tens.
Yeah, I mean, I was gonna
But
say,
but the
like,
reality is, for the most part, you'll get a pretty decent set of stats, and everyone basically kind of starts in an even playing field. Now, there are some people that don't like that, and I get that. I get some people are like, well, no, I want to roll, or we'll just do point buy. In this scenario, I don't understand if they didn't want
just
the stats to be
just
higher than standard
do
array, just do
point
point buy.
buy. Just do a standard
Um,
array slash point buy. Like, I don't. He
be-
literally said those words. He says they
yeah,
can't. The rolls can't be higher than point
yeah.
buy.
It's
Like it's like okay, did you just from what that says to me here is that he just didn't want to give his players then more control over their stats. Then he wanted them to just roll random, but have it be within the power balance of point buy without giving the players the freedom to allocate how they might want in that way, which is just asinine. Because again, what Sam said before, for me, in a number of games that I've played, for instance, I also do a similar thing where we do, like, I've done the roll 46, drop 7 times, drop the lowest, reroll ones, for instance. In one of the games that I'm playing right now in a campaign I really love, they had a rule where you roll 2d6 plus and add 6 to the roll, and you do that 6 times. And it's like, and I think you can do it twice, or you can choose to re-roll one roll. I think it's specifically that you can roll 2d6 plus 6. So that way, at no point will you ever roll lower than an 8 in any stat. Like you won't. And so it's like it gives you a much higher chance of rolling high, rolling 18s or 17s or whatever. But it also restricts you from getting like a freaking 3 or a 4 or a 5, which just sucks in a lot of ways. Not all the time. Sometimes it can be funny and it can add, like, a thing or whatever. But it absolutely, like, I found, yeah, the 2d6 plus 6 heavily helps to restrict the possibility of there being a huge power disparity, right? Even if someone rolls really hella great, at the very least, the lowest that anybody else could roll obviously would be all 8s. I would say in that instance, if that actually happened, you would just re-roll your whole stat line at that point. And you can also, at any point, you can choose to re-roll a certain stat roll as well, and then potentially get higher. You usually probably have a higher chance to get higher if you've rolled low. So it's like, but with this, it clearly seems like this guy just wanted more. Like even the OP himself, I think he had a marvelous sixth sense. The OP, I think, was like clairvoyant here because he definitely could see, like, this was just
like, I'm getting out of
this was just stinky, bro. This whole thing just kind of
Hey,
stank.
remember when you made fun of me when I said that if I had joined a table and in the first 10 minutes someone said some bullshit homebrew rule, that I would just nope the fuck out? See, it's a good thing.
Hey. Sometimes, yes, there are absolutely times
Yeah,
where
like when I do.
people are saying no, not all the time. You also have an incredibly low tolerance to the point of you just being like, yeah, like, of anything. Increase your tolerance a little bit, just a
It's the
smidge.
namesake.
Yeah.
Disgusting.
But point being, this guy, he clearly knew. I absolutely love the fact he smelt it. He smelt it, and he was like, you know what?
Yep.
I'm good, G. I'm straight. I think I'm good. I'm about to hit the old dusty trail.
I'm gonna get
Thanks.
out of here.
Yeah. Like, and it's like, again, he's like, they just really wanted someone to roll poorly. Or, as my theory is, he wanted the same power because he didn't want them to be too powerful. He didn't want them to be too good, but he also didn't want to give them any more control over that, because again, if you have control, if you have point buy, you could, sacrifice certain attributes to make others really good. And
but
he was
then you're
like,
only good at one thing.
Yeah, or two things, and then you're really bad at two other things, So it's like,
I don't know. Point buy to me is like,
it's still fun. Like, it's great.
It works, and like
I mean, again, honestly, I still like to roll because I like the opportunity to make my character, because again, one of my biggest gripes with D&D 5e is attributes are so hard to increase. Again, you only get them basically every 4 levels, and it's just like, oh my god, because so much of what you do is based on the attributes, and I wish that there was a way for you to increase your attributes easier. There are, obviously, you can train them in game, but the rules for that are like very kind of dependent on if your GM uses them, or even some homebrew rules and implements them, and it's just it's a thing. And it's like, the problem being is leveling up is such a rare thing in the game, unless your GM is really on that shit and one to get there. And so I'm like, rolling though helps to offset that. If you roll really good, then you don't even really need to worry about your attributes as much. You don't need to worry about leveling up as high if you get high rolls and stuff. But it's like, if you get low rolls, then you're kind of just screwed. But that's indeed, I think this is what this guy wanted to restrict. He didn't want to give his players the ability to roll higher.
Yeah.
But
I mean, like, the reality is, like, I don't understand why you want, like, if you don't want them to roll, then don't have them roll.
He wanted them to roll. He just didn't want them to roll high.
Part of me is like, a DM like this, just, if you don't want them to have crazy stats, just do point buy or standard array.
That's what I'm saying.
No offense. Because standard array is one of those things where I don't like standard array. I prefer point buy.
Yeah.
But like, to be completely honest, like, standard array is just doesn't work that well with some classes.
No, it's just not as applicable.
Of a class that just sucks with standard array. But with, like,
you can maybe make it work, but it's just not. It's not as fun. Like, why not just give the player, if you're gonna have a set amount of numbers or whatever, just give the player the ability to change the overall allocation like they want. There's no reason not to. Every video game does that.
Yeah.
Like,
and like, I don't know, as a DM, if you're really that worried about overpowered characters, then just do point buy. Just do point buy, and don't give them the option of rolling. If they ask you, like, hey, I just prefer us to use point buy. And if they don't like it, they won't play. But, like, don't say yes to rolling and then not actually say yes.
And then have to say you have to roll within the parameters or within the range of point buy or standard array. It's like, that doesn't make any sense. I'm gonna sit here rolling. Standard array is like 15, 14, 12, 10, 8, or I'm sorry, 15, 14, 13, 12, 10, 8, I believe, is standard array. And it's like, what, like, again, it's like, you're sitting here and it's just like, dude, like, why? No. It's just like, it is absolutely asinine. And the fact, again, he's not communicating at all. He's like, I would love to have seen what their session 0 was, because it's like, he's sitting here rolling and he's saying, like, oh no, I trust your rolls, but they're just too high. It's like, how do you expect, you really want me to sit here and just roll 6 times, 46, like, over and over again until I get within the range of standard array? Like, what is your mind? Are you baked out of your goddamn skull? Like, what? I don't even know, bro. I do not know how to even really process or compute what this dude is.
Standard array is 72 points.
Yes.
And we always had a thing that if you did your roll instead of standard array or point buy, and you rolled under 72,
you just get
to re-roll.
Yeah, or re-roll.
No, it was just that stat line doesn't count because it's under literally the bare minimum for being an adventurer. Because we always looked at it as standard array is, you kind of need to be good at something to be an adventurer.
Yeah, like,
it kind of goes along with the idea of, this character wants to go do something and has skills required to go do these things.
Unless you're making like a meme character.
Yeah, but
but
again,
I
I
agree.
understand some people do it. I hate it.
I agree.
I hate
I'm
it.
not as I mean,
I
if you're
don't
having
like it.
fun,
Yeah,
whatever,
but you're
more power to
useless.
you. But you're also like if you're
I
in a
can't
group,
rely on you
that's what
to
I'm
do
saying. If you're
anything.
in a group and it's like, why would we
You
ever
fucking suck at
why
everything.
would we ever want you to do something if you're bad at just
Yeah.
most things? It's like,
And I do
why?
understand some characters start as a joke but are still competent, and that's a different scenario. But if you literally build a shitty character and then you expect me to sit
I
next
mean,
to you at a table and
you're
like
just
have fun, I'm
trolling
not
at
going
that point.
to.
You're kind of just actively trolling at that point, and
Yeah.
I don't neither me or Sam particularly stand for or like that at all.
No.
And it's just like,
That's just
yeah,
me
dude.
though. And to be fair, I know some people are gonna feel different, and like
Yeah.
you're entitled to that opinion. But if I sat down at a table and that's what was given
I
to
mean,
me,
like,
I'd leave. Like again, I know I have no tolerance, but like to be completely honest, like I don't want to sit through a game where we just fucking suck. Like, sorry, D&D is an escapist hobby for people that want to do things, not sit and do nothing or suck at
mhm.
everything. And like that's what it is. Like I suck at everything in real life. I don't want to suck at everything in a game where I get to build a character to do cool shit. It's just
I
not fair.
agree. I also again I have a personal taste and a preference. I want to be powerful in these games. And not just me as a GM, I would love my players to be powerful and competent and skillful and amazing. Like in my games, how I run it is I'm literally like you have the two options. You can roll two stat lines and choose either one. If you don't like either of them, then you can take point buy instead. Like if you just roll really crappy, then you can choose to do point buy. Like
Yeah.
that's how I do it. And I'm like, yeah, and I'm definitely implementing the 2d6 plus 6 rule as well from now on too, to just give you a higher chance at being able to be really powerful because I like that. I want you guys to be strong. I want to be strong. That's the point of this. Like at least that's how we feel. Again, obviously not everybody feels the same way, and that's fine. More power to you. Whatever you enjoy, whatever gets you off, baby. That's what we say. It's fine. Just don't be starting to try to get all
I
that
don't
over
say
here.
that.
Yes, you do, Sam. That is the motto of the Arcane Archive. It's canon now.
Whatever gets you off.
Whatever gets you off, baby.
I
You
don't
got to
think
say
that
the
was the
baby part.
motto.
Whatever gets you off,
What?
baby. All right.
I don't like that motto.
It's happening, bud.
You have to say it as Alistair.
Yeah. Whatever gets you off, baby.
Oh.
Oh yeah, I like that a lot. Yeah, I'm gonna have to record that. We're gonna put that
Elias
in
is not saying that.
there. He is. He absolutely will. He'll dominate person if he has to. Anywho, let's move on to the next story that we got for y'all here. This is also going to be a bit of a shorter one, maybe more of a medium length overall. But it is titled DM forces all players to agree on every decision before we do anything. AITA? Okay. So I've got a bit of a problem in a game I've been playing in for a long time now. Upwards of 3 years at this point, but been with that group for way longer. The DM is great. The players are great. We all get along amazingly 99% of the time. The issue I have is that whenever there is a decision to be made, if not everyone agrees, then the DM literally waits until we all agree before letting us do anything, or even punishes us for not agreeing with each other. This is the example that made me want to write this post, but there are far more. We were recently framed for murder of a high-ranking noble, and were on the run while trying to clear our names. We were stopped by a large group of commoners, approximately 40, who were armed with pitchforks and other simple weapons. The commoners told us that they wanted to take us in and would do it with force if we didn't go willingly. Now, the party was divided. One player, who I'll call John, wanted to let ourselves get taken by them for out-of-game reasons, stating that it was probably what the DM wanted for the story, which everybody else, including the DM, called him out for because of metagaming. Another player, who I'll call Susan, wanted to fight our way out. I agreed with Susan. Since we are level 9, we could probably take them on. And since our characters would reasonably believe that if we go with the commoners, we would be executed. The last player, who I'll call Bobby, wanted to bribe them. The issue was that the commoners had already been offered 10,000 gold for our arrest, and we'd have to pay more than that, which we did not have. Me and Susan told Bobby and John that if they wanted to bribe them or go with them, Susan and I wouldn't join them, and that our characters wouldn't go down without a fight. This caused the DM to get mad, saying that if we didn't all agree, then he would wait until we did, and that he wouldn't let any of us do separate things. Now, I get the idea that splitting the party isn't great, but it was a tense roleplay moment with high stakes. Everybody was at odds, trying to do what they thought was the best choice. And if we needed to do different things to make it work, then we should do that. I can also see that it would be difficult to have the party doing different things for the DM, but we've done things like that on a higher scale before. We ended up finishing the session early as things were getting tense out of game, and the DM has postponed our next session for a couple extra weeks, saying, I need a break to figure stuff out for the game. I feel like maybe I was the asshole here, but I'm not sure. What do you all think? End post. So, again, in this particular story, there's a lot of kind of sides to this that are kind of important, such as, again, and the OP themselves does highlight them, right? In this thing, I am a little like kind of annoyed with John, who like is basically just like, yeah, let's just go with them, like, because that's what this GM clearly wants for story purposes. So why, like, we shouldn't fight it. Let's just go. It's like,
I mean, I love that everyone called him out on metagaming.
I literally, it's like, that's just like, what kind of logic or reasoning is that? Again, is that, how would your, like, what would your character think in this situation? Like, again, if you have a literal angry mob of commoners with pitchforks and weapons and torches, would your character really want to go with them? I mean, what, are you like a cleric who's just like, this is my God's plan, we will be fine, or maybe not. Either way, we should go with them. It's like, even that would be a bit of a stretch.
I mean, there could be a plan. It could be like, oh well, they're bringing us right to the person we need to take down, or I get it, but like also,
well, but apparently from the OP and Susan, they apparently have reason, and not an unnecessary reason, to believe that they are apparently going to be brought to execution because they were framed for the death of a high nobleman. So it's like,
yeah. What I don't understand is the person who wanted to bribe them. Like, I don't want to be that guy, but like there's the one. It's one thing to be like, well, I don't think we can get out of this and give up. That's okay.
Or you don't want to fight commoners, right? You don't want to actually destroy or unalive.
Well, you don't have to.
Innocent people.
Back, blunt end of a weapon.
Not every player character can do that. You're firing magic, you can't non-lethally.
Then you run. I mean, like, that's
the thing. Yeah. If it's just maybe one or two characters against 40, even at level 9, hard to say whether or not they'd be able to do it by themselves.
Yeah.
If you have magic to back you up, you probably could, but magic ain't gonna be non-lethal, unfortunately. See, for instance, well, if you're gonna do like a shocking grasp, like it was like a melee attack spell, I might allow, like, you can maybe do non-lethally. I like that. Not every GM allows that. I personally think it's like, hey, you can mitigate or control how much energy you're putting into like a shocking grasp, or like how hard you're gonna whip somebody with like a thorn whip or something. But like, yeah, you're absolutely not gonna be like, fireball, hey, I did it non-lethally. Like, nah, you incinerated them. Okay?
I will also say this. There are spells that aren't lethal by design.
True, and that are used for control in a wide area of effect.
And so, like, you might have to get a little bit finicky with it. I would argue, something like shocking grasp, or what's that druid?
Thorn whip.
Thorn whip.
Freaking primal savagery.
There are ones that like you can magic stone.
Yeah, arguably,
you can aim for non-lethal damage.
Yeah,
hitting someone in the leg with a magic stone isn't going to kill them, because even if you get shot in the leg, you don't die. It could hurt.
See, that's the thing. Technically speaking, some GMs or players will argue, well, you also can't non-lethal with a ranged weapon because it specifically says it's only melee weapons, and it's like, that's also stupid to me. You can, like you said, you can shoot someone in the leg non-lethally. You can shoot someone in the arm. You can shoot someone in the foot. It's not going to be lethal.
Also, I don't think there's actually a rule in D&D for...
I think there is. I believe
non-lethal.
I specifically believe that there is an actual rule for non-lethal damage, and that it has to be
non-lethal damage.
Like non-lethal. So yeah, regarding non-lethal damage. The basic rule of thumb is that after damage is rolled, if that attack was target, if an attack can specify the attack was meant to knock out the target, Yeah, if the attack was a ranged attack or a spell attack, then this option is not available. Apparently, WotC doesn't believe in knocking people out with the comical arrowheads, knife handles, etc. Spell effects make sense though. Yeah. So like, for whatever reason, ranged attacks and spell attacks are not. Like again, spell attacks, maybe I would still
I'll
even argue.
I'll give you like it's hard with an arrow because a piercing attack can be fatal in areas that are not traditionally fatal. You could pin someone to the floor through their feet. That's not lethal. But
Well, I'm
like,
gonna say if you
say
hit him
you,
like if
oh,
you
I
hit him
shoot
in
him in
like
the leg, but
yeah,
there's an
the
artery there
thigh.
that if it goes through, you will die in minutes.
Well, that's also why you don't. Well, only again if you like pull the arrow out, and then obviously, yeah, you're gonna
Yeah.
start bleeding out.
But like,
But if you shoot them with the arrow in there
yeah.
and it's non-lethal, also at this point, if you hit them and you're a super, you're like Legolas level like aim. You know probably where an artery is, and you can fire at them like in the leg or something, or again in an arm, or maybe just in the gut. You fire at them in the gut. They're not gonna die
Yeah.
necessarily just from that. So
It
it's
is
like
just melee attacks, which I would argue
because
that's not the
I
case.
would argue melee attacks make even less sense potentially because it's like, oh hey, you knock someone out in the back of the head. How dangerous are freaking head strikes like concussions? You could
Yeah.
absolutely be done
Still
in
kill
by that.
somebody.
Yeah, it's like if you could do it with melee, then you can do it with ranged attacks. There's no
To a degree,
actual
yeah.
reason for that.
But this
Like
is this whole scenario this DM has dreamt up and like then refuses to let the players actually play what they want to do. There's something I've always believed in, and that's like if you have a party that's having a split decision, say in this example, there's an angry mob, yada yada, they want to take you to the gallows, whatever. If one person in your party doesn't want to fight them, and a couple people do, like the reality is running away is an option that technically fills everyone's desires
I was gonna
because
say,
the
like
goal
you
of
can
fighting
still
them is
run.
to the goal of fighting them is and not killing them is to get away. The goal of running is to get away.
Yeah.
um the bribery one doesn't make sense because that's not how angry
No.
mobs work, nor bribery.
Well, also,
um
again, like they already should. Clearly, the players already knew they're doing this for the reward of 10,000 gold. You don't
yeah,
have 10,000 gold. How could
which
you possibly bribe them out of what doing this would provide them? Like,
yeah, and like so there's always options. I would be a little bit disappointed, if I was playing in a table where like people genuinely were like, I want to do this, and I went and like someone else wants to do a different thing, and the DM was just like, oh well, we're not doing anything until you guys agree. Because I'd be like,
that's annoying. It's like you can't.
I honestly go fuck yourself. Because like
Yeah, a little bit.
I'm
Just
not just
like
gonna not play like because
well, it's like it's
and
like it's literally that whole thing about like it's almost literally like you stick two people in a room together and you're just like, you guys better get along, or I'm just gonna hold you guys here until you get along. And it's like, how does that actually handle the
no,
situation
it
at
doesn't.
all? That is the dumbest way to try to resolve any kind of issue or conflict or whatever the hell. Like that's not gonna work. You can't just say, get along, you guys. Like, really?
No, it doesn't
Why
work
are
that
we
way.
playing the game then? Why are we here? And you're literally saying it's like I need to take an extra couple of weeks or whatever to figure out stuff for the game. And it's like you again, don't get me wrong. I understand. As a GM, yes, it probably will become exponentially more complicated and more work if your party does separate things. That is a thing. And it can be annoying and frustrating to be like, okay, now we're going to cut back to you. Okay, now we're going to cut back to you. But sometimes you got to do it. Sometimes if you in the name of just again immersion, fluidity, progression, like reasonable logical progression, sometimes the party is going to split up. And you need to be able to handle that to a certain extent for at least a certain period of time.
Yeah. I
Not
also
forever.
I mean, this also can be very easily solved talking to like as a player, talking with the other players out of character. Because like if the reality is that sometimes with a table, it's the characters that aren't aligned, not the players.
A lot of
And
the time, I
it
think
can
that's kind of the
it
way.
can cause a lot of stress. And it might be a conversation worth having to maybe alter some of the characters that are being played at the table. If this happens, if this is the one thing dragging your game down, and when these kinds of things happen, it really sucks for everyone involved, then maybe playing a group of people that are like-minded would be a better choice.
I
I'm not
mean,
saying they have to agree on everything, but like this is a fairly simple
I was
thing
gonna
that
say, like, I
I
feel like
don't
that's.
I don't think a single one of my created D&D characters would choose to bribe or choose to go with an angry mob, if I'm going to be completely honest. And I've made characters throughout a
Like,
spectrum of
yeah,
type of
same.
person, but all of them would either defend themselves or run. Like because those are the two options, in my opinion.
I mean,
Um,
and even the other huge aspect of this is like, okay, look, GM, go with the majority. Okay, if like put it to a party vote. Hey, what do we want to do here? Now here, apparently, it seems like it's split down the middle between the party. However, everybody literally called out the one player whose only reason apparently for wanting to go with them or whatever is because
metagaming.
metagaming. So it's like, okay, well that immediately kind of has to get shunted out the
Well,
window.
yeah, the metagame doesn't
Like,
count. So it's really
so
between
again, why
two.
what is your then in-game reason for why your character would go with them? Are you just gonna try to keep the peace? Are you just like are you sure? Like, do you have a reason to not want to get away? Like,
Yeah.
because again, it seems like they're maybe kind of saying they want to fight their way out. So it might seem, I assume, that they're trapped currently. Like they cannot avoid having to fight to then get away. But if you've got, I mean, unless you have a party of all martial classes, you probably have a means of teleporting, or you guys are level 9 at this point.
There's some creative thing you could do.
Like to
Put a
to
wall
get
between you
away
and
from them.
them,
Hell,
you
just
know.
do a just take the disengage action, run through all of them, or like jump over them. Like do the cool Matrix Neo 100 Smith fight where he like jumps on top of their heads trying to get away, or like have a fighter or a paladin bull rush through them with like an
Yeah.
athletics check. They're
Yeah.
commoners. You're level
Just
9.
put a
Just
shield up and
literally,
run.
yeah, literally just go like and just start knocking them over like
Yeah.
bowling pins. Like,
Because at the end of the day, what they're not proficient with these weapons. They're improvised weapons, so they're doing a D4 at most,
I
probably
mean,
without any
I
additives.
was gonna say maybe because if they're commoners, they probably all have just like a 10, so they
So
have no pluses.
it's
They
either
got,
+0 or +1, and they're
yeah, if that,
rolling, so they'd have to roll high.
and
Um,
they'd have to keep up with you to like if you
yeah.
if you start dashing or whatever. Like, heck, even if you don't take the disengage action, just take the dash action, and they would have to dash themselves to keep up with you. At which point you could just augment your escape probably with like running through like alleyways or doors
Like there's
or
always another
magic. Like, you
like
could,
there's
again,
always another way. And like even nowadays, even martial classes a lot of times have some form of escape or something
or
to give them an
I
edge
assume
over
you'll
a
also have some
normal
magical
person.
items. Like,
These are
but
normal
again, this is
people.
also a great way of being like, hey, give your martial classes some supernatural aspects to their strength and their physical prowess. Yo, there's like walls close together. Give them an athletics or acrobatics check to begin jumping off that mother effer to get to the top of the
Yeah.
buildings to then start parkouring across the rooftops or something.
There's always
Like,
options. I like,
or at
you
least there
know,
should be. If your GM has any amount of competency, there should always be options. But that being the case, we'll put this one to bed since we've talked enough about it. Sam, you want to go ahead and hit your last one?
is this the social?
Yeah.
Okay. This is social encounter sabotage. This happened a few years back in my first ever Forgotten Realms campaign. We had this guy who joined our party, whose backstory was that he was a Githzerai sorcerer from outer space. In fairness to the guy, I get what he was going for, fish out of water and all that. The character concept was good, the execution not so much, as we shall see. The problem was that our campaign was dependent on our party acquiring clues and information from the communities of Icewind Dale in order to solve a series of murders. This meant that in order to achieve anything at all, we had to build up at least a modicum of trust with the local community. The new player was made well aware of this before he joined and seemed to understand. Imagine our horror and the NPCs when the new Githzerai sorcerer immediately turns the murder victims into zombie servants. The NPCs are understandably horrified at the sight of their relatives' reanimated corpses being used as free labor. The sorcerer tells them to their face how stupid they all are for not using necromancy to resolve their labor shortages. We get sent to jail. and the sorcerer, instead of learning from the experience, loudly proclaims how stupid everyone in Icewind Dale is. Every single social encounter we had from there on followed this pattern. Every single one. The sorcerer would encounter something that was different from his own culture and would drone on about how stupid everyone here was and how everything worked so much better where he was from. He would make fun of the magical abilities of wizards we encountered to their faces. He would summon monsters inside of the palaces of officials we needed to befriend, and he would go out of his way to unsettle people. At no point did the sorcerer ever show any signs of learning, character development, or humility. His players seemed to actively look for ways in which he could upset or annoy important NPCs, and it always surfaced whenever the party needed to get information from someone, or even when the rest of the party simply wanted to have some nice roleplay and get immersed in the setting. Every session had become a miserable, humorless grind. Questlines that should have taken a single session to complete took 3 simply because no one would talk to us or trust us. NPCs who we had a chance to ally with became hostile or simply shunned us. All the while, the sorcerer runs on his same old train. We all knew it was a problem, but because he hadn't actually done or said anything egregious, bigotry, stalking, or pervy stuff, there was nothing the DM could do beyond repeatedly giving him a private talking to. Eventually, the problem was resolved when the guy got bored and left the game of his own volition, too much to our collective relief. Now,
I feel
again, what's funny, you talked earlier when we were talking 101 about, oh, this dude definitely played Baldur's Gate. This was years ago, so he didn't do that. But I
I mean,
I like the concept of playing a fish out of water character,
well, sure.
something that's very different.
Well,
Like,
I
or
wouldn't say
doesn't.
it's different. It's pretty played out, honestly.
No,
People
no, I
like to
mean
do
like
it, but
different from the norm of people in the area.
yes,
You know,
yes.
playing in
You
Curse
have a
of
different
Strahd, and
culture. It's a
you're like,
culture shock thing.
my friend played a lion and blood hunter in Curse of Strahd. There is nothing in Curse of Strahd that has anything similar to his culture or his upbringing,
No.
any of it. But it was cool because he didn't play it off like a jackass. The reality is, like, if this person just wasn't, it wasn't necessarily like an intentional to make everyone's life a living
I
hell,
feel
then
like it
I
kind of
wouldn't.
was.
No, I'm
Like,
saying no, no, no. Let me finish.
okay,
It
sorry. Go
was.
ahead.
He even said it was. But what I'm saying is, if you play this kind of character and like unintentionally at the
Yeah.
beginning of you playing this character, you unsettle people, because you're actually playing to what the character would actually act like
Yeah.
in the culture that they're from. But then your character learns that maybe some of those things aren't so good, and you learn and you use that learning to not continue to be a problem. Then I think it's great. This person obviously came to the table to cause a problem. It's evident by the fact that it's described that they like actively looked to make things worse at every given moment. Is like, and again, I do not understand why they don't have to say pervy shit or weird shit or be creepy to
No,
get
they
kicked from a
didn't. They
table.
just have to be literally a problem.
After the
Like,
first time he was brought to the side to be talked to, that he didn't take any of that to the heart and use it, they should be gone.
it's like
So many of these problems would just.
it's like I feel like there are so many solutions to this issue that are like very straightforward. Yeah, like you just said, you literally have talked to him. You gave him 2 tries. That's my usual limit. I'm like, everybody gets 2. Again, you get the first warning of like, okay, he's maybe being a little bit, like again, you have a character concept, you're giving it a try. Maybe it isn't really working as well as you thought. It's not really jiving or connecting. All right, that's fine. Maybe your character can start to learn now. Okay, your character's not learning. Okay, well, that's a problem then. Like, they are not really conducive then to this group. Like, you cannot, like, again, my question would also be, if this guy just thinks everything that he is so much better than everything else, why are you with the party? What exactly is your actual reason or your motivation for being here? Go back home then. If you hate everything here, if you're always complaining, if you're like, why are you even here? Go back home.
Yeah.
And it's like, if you are trying to go back home and you need the party for that reason or something, then you should probably, again, your character is not an idiot. Even in Baldur's Gate 3, where yes, Lizelle can absolutely have this same kind of vibe where she is always talking and complaining how her people are the superior ones. It's like, okay, it's fine. But she also does know when to shut the hell up and to not like say things openly. That doesn't actively impact our experience or interaction with other characters. Like she can be that way, and she might have like it has more to do with our relationship with her than our relationship with other characters. And that's another thing about the GM. It's like, okay, you have this character in the party that's like this. Not all the characters are like that. Why is the GM playing it where like all the NPCs don't trust the whole party? Like that's one of the biggest things about this that I never understood about a lot of GMs, and how they punish the entire party for the actions of one character. It's like, oh hey, they're with you. That doesn't mean that their sins or their law breaking or their crimes are then everybody. It's like, this character did this thing. They go to jail. The whole party doesn't have to go to jail with them. They didn't do that thing with them.
Yeah.
They did this thing, and they're like, okay, well, we're taking him to jail. You didn't do anything, so we're not taking him. It's like, okay.
It'd be one thing if the party went and gathered the corpses together for him to cast the spell,
or actively told him to. Or
yeah, this is different. I think my favorite thing is something you pointed out, and also one of the comments on here is that's Githyanki behavior.
It is
Casual contempt and indifference to consequence, needless antagonism, and self-aggrandizing behavior. Like you're not even playing the character correctly by means of your own idea, which makes it even funnier to me. Because I get it. You know, I have a friend. I had a friend in one of my games who was playing a what are the ooze guys?
Plasmoids.
Yeah, he's playing a plasmoid. So like he doesn't understand a lot of the social cues because, you know, in humans or humanoid races, your face and your expression has to do with your social cues. His people are expressionless in that sense. They are physically expressionless in the sense that we would be able to understand it. They might have ways of expressing themselves physically that we don't understand.
I'm sure.
But to him, he had trouble picking up things like sarcasm, lying, people's emotional state, unless it was expressly given to him. And it at first I was like of course. But I actually ended up liking it a lot.
I was gonna say, it makes sense. It's logical. It's realistic. At least, depending.
The thing I loved the most was he had a circlet of human perfection.
Mm-hmm.
But because all it does is make you look
human.
like a human,
yeah.
Its anatomy didn't line up correctly. So when he would go to like shake someone's hand,
it would
just be like, it would shoot out of his abdomen, or like his face would be in the wrong place on the body, and it was the grossest. He would describe it. I hated it. I loved it. But like every session, I was reminded that he is wearing a circlet of human perfection.
He's literally wearing human skin.
But he has moved his body into a cube shape.
Yep.
So it's just
looks horrific. Like a human cube of flesh.
It's so bad, yeah.
It's great. Like, I love that. That's amazing.
That's an example of a character that, like, yeah, you know what? In certain social situations, they might fuck it up unknowingly. But they're not antagonizing anyone.
No, like, they're not actively antagonizing. They're not causing detrimental effects again to the party, like not long lasting.
Yeah, and like sometimes there were like the first couple of sessions we played with him with that character, it was definitely more pronounced, and as things went on, it was less pronounced.
Because you learn, you begin to adapt the culture a little bit.
It's a bit.
Yeah,
it is a bit of a bit, and like
absolutely, it's completely a bit. Really,
but like you notice, I want to use here's an example. I will say Grog from Campaign 1 in Critical Role.
Mm-hmm.
He had a hard time understanding people. He couldn't read or write. Like, you know, there were a lot of issues with what he thought was normal versus what everyone else thought was normal.
Yep.
And early on in the game and into the middle of the game, like Travis played it very well. But like it was when Grog was there, you knew Grog was there because something was happening, something dumb or whatever. But as the game went on, he picked his battles in a sense of like what he really wanted to pronounce in any given situation. So like you have the moment where they get to Whitestone and he goes in the kitchen and tells them what to make for dinner after someone else had gone in there.
I know, right?
It's just like, this is completely unneeded, but like at the same time, exactly, it makes perfect sense. It's not hurting anyone. Well, and it's also not derailing everything.
What's great too about Grog though, that's almost literally his entire character concept, in that he was literally raised in a horde of literal savage barbarians looking to plunder, pillage, grape, all that stuff.
Yeah.
But he himself, he saw this little gnome person, and he didn't want to just destroy them. He was like, oh, this doesn't feel right. And he's literally a character who has a lot of rather violent and what some would say, more negative tendencies and inclinations. But he has this inner piece of him that is trying to learn to be a better person, an individual, where he grows. He learns. He is actively learning. He's an idiot, so it's hard for him to learn, but he is always actively trying to a certain extent, at least when it comes to like his friends like Pike or Scanlan, although Scanlan often will kind of like cater more to his more negative aspects. They kind of feed into each other. But as they go, though, still, it is more like, hey, he is trying to learn to be better.
Yeah.
Another big glaring oversight I feel, too, though, with this whole thing is the fact that this dude, he wasn't even a Githyanki. He was a Githzerai, apparently, who are supposed to be far more, like, they can still be arrogant.
They're more peaceful.
But they are far more wise and incorporating and understanding. They're not as overtly douchey and assholey. Like they can be to it. Again, they absolutely still, they're more like high elves than dark elves. Githyanki are like dark elves kind of, and Githzerai are like high elves. So they can be snooty, they can be, again, conceited maybe even, but they're not necessarily, again, actively antagonistic or assholes just because, and it's like, that's, again, one of the biggest aspects of like, why? Because again, the dude clearly, literally, the problem player left the group because he got bored. Because he just kept apparently actively trying to find ways to upset. And again, for the GM, you can have that character be upset with that character. That's fine. But you don't have to reflect that on the entire party. Why would you do that? Why would you reflect on the entire party, the actions of one character? In fact, at that point, I would also just said, there's plenty of things you can do. The party can kick this player out or the character out. Be like, hey, you are not helping us. You seem to almost be actively sabotaging and messing everything up. So either fix your shit or you are gone. Leave. Go away. You are not helping. Like, there are so many ways to handle this situation. I just don't understand how he says, like, well, just because he didn't do the obligatory big three problems, which are like the essay or the pervy stuff or whatever. It's like, you don't need all of that. That's fine. Like he's clearly still being problematic. He's ruining the game, apparently. So either get him to fix his character if it's not his intention as a player to just outright fuck with the game, or boot the player if no matter what he does, he's still trying to sabotage. Like, I feel like once more, this is a textbook example of people actively trying to avoid confrontation. Although the GM apparently didn't. Is like, oh, well, the GM talked to him and had a meeting with him, and it's like, okay, well, you as players can also do this thing too, where you're in the game. If he's doing this and he's making the excuse that it's what my character would do, guess what? What would your characters do then to a character who was actively screwing everything up for what you need to accomplish? Would your characters not then be like, you have to go. You have to leave. We're not going to attack you necessarily. We're not going to try and hurt you, but you cannot be here. Like, you are sabotaging and messing this all up. So you either need to check your shit, fix it, or leave. That is what your characters would then do. I don't understand people being so utterly willing to deal with other people's shit and without doing anything, saying anything about it. Like, just something. Don't you care about this game? Don't you love to do this? Isn't that why you're here? You make all of this time. You deliberately plan and schedule. You make all this stuff. And this is what's happening. And you're not even willing to try and fight for it in the slightest way, in the smallest way. Come on, dude. It's just, it grinds my gears. I'm like, bro, I get it. Confrontation is hard and it is scary. But in this way, you don't even have to directly confront this dude either. So it's like, what? You just have to risk being a little uncomfortable. That's it. And you can't even do that for this? Like, bro, come on, dude. Well, you know what, y'all? I do believe that in essence. I think it's the last one we're gonna do for day. We gotta be getting out of here pretty soon. But you know what? If you guys have stuck with us for this long to this point, we thank you all very much. As always, please do be sure to like and comment on the video. Tell us down in the comments below, like, what your thoughts are on these stories that we read here. Like did these people, did these GMs do their due diligence and what they should have been doing with these problem players and stuff? What could they have done better? What have you experienced? Like, have you ever experienced players or GMs like this who have like been doing some messed up stuff that didn't make any sense or that was annoying? Did you have other players in your party that were like lying and not being honest or whatever? For me, for instance, I actually did just have kind of my own kind of thing a little while ago, recently. No, I shouldn't say, yeah, a little recently, where in one of the campaigns I'm playing in, me and this other player, he had made a character who was a bit more like fish out of water. They didn't necessarily understand a lot more of the context and the more social cues and understanding. And they had kind of started to initiate with my character, seemingly what seemed to be kind of a bit of like a rivalry thing, where they would kind of like, we'd kind of verbally snipe or razz one another and stuff. But apparently it kind of got to a point where it was feeling a little bit personal. And it got to the point where this other player literally attacked my familiar specifically and took them out, destroyed them, which obviously then prompted my character to respond in a more hostile manner as well, where I threatened that if they were to do that again, then my character would take them out. Like they would then attack them.
Yeah.
And it's like the next session, when this was addressed once more by some of the other party members too, who were like, what happened? What's going on? The player, I guess, left because they were feeling a bit maybe embarrassed or just bad vibes. Like they started feeling like things were maybe getting a little bit out of control and hitting a little bit too close to home. And that was not my intention at all. Like I had my GM had like contacted me and asked to kind of go into a private call to like discuss some things. And kind of told me like, yeah, like things were getting a little bit, apparently out of hand. And like, I was like, I was worried that had been the case. Like when he left before, I was like, I hope that we didn't accidentally scare him away or anything, or like, because that was not my intention. But, it just goes to show, when you're kind of doing this thing and you're just kind of engaging in character and you might seemingly feel like, hey, things might be getting a little out of control, but I had thought initially that this was kind of his desire to want to, create this conflict so that our characters could then mutually kind of overcome it and then grow closer as a thing. Was kind of because he had sent me messages in IRL saying that he was really excited to play and get together and like, really start creating some really cool dynamics. And I was like, awesome, that's great. And so when he kind of started doing this thing in character, I was like, okay, I assume that this is kind of where this is going and that it'll eventually culminate in our characters like, being able to move past it. But they didn't apparently like feel that way. It started getting a little bit too real, and they decided that the best way to move forward is that they had to scrap the character and come back with a different one. Which I was like, okay, if that's what they wanted to do, that's their prerogative. It's perfectly fine. Like again, apologies for any unfortunate like misunderstandings or if things got a little bit too like whatever. The GM was also pretty like, I just want to make it clear I'm not blaming anybody. It just seems like things got like a little bit too like intense, maybe a little bit too like whatever. Once active combat or PvP starts to happen, I felt a little like perturbed with that, like when they decided to actually attack like my familiar, like I was that was the point where I was like, ooh, okay, maybe things have gone
There was a button pushed here,
maybe, or something, which
yeah.
I wasn't aware of at the time because we were kind of just again verbally razzing one another. And then I guess I don't know, because then obviously at that point too, I felt for my character, I was like, I can't really justify him reacting in any other way. Like his familiar is one of the most important things to him. Like they are incredibly close. Like someone straight up attacking them, he would feel a sense of betrayal, a sense of hurt, and so he would obviously respond in a very you know, intense manner to that. That's not something that can just go unaddressed or whatever. I'm not going to attack them back because I don't want to start instigating all of that. But he absolutely will respond in this way, and that's, you know, that does come kind of back to the thing of like, this is what my character would do, you know. Yeah. But in this instance, I don't want to attack. I don't want to keep pushing PvP for it to escalate to this point. I want to get to a point where we can find that, you know, whatever. But sometimes you can't necessarily do that in game, right?
No.
Sometimes you're not able to maybe get to that point, and you kind of do just have to out of game take it out, take a step back, and be like, okay, you know what? In order for us to both be able to best still play, have fun, and keep the relationship, you know, cordial and nice and good, maybe we just kind of need to reset and just be like, you know what? let's not do that. Let's scrap that. Let's just kind of do a bit of a reset. And that's okay. It's all right. And in fact, is often probably better. You can't always solve everything in game, because sometimes even your best intentions can sometimes lead you astray, as with everything, and that's okay. But sorry, I went off on a bit of a tangent there because I just, you know. But with that, again, thank you guys all so very much for tuning in. We hope you enjoyed today's episode. Be sure to, you know, share and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. We always appreciate it. And we'll be sure to see you guys in the next time we dive back down into the archive. Adios, everybody.
See you guys.